Hey guys, welcome to my guide on how to deal with cannibals in Dreadhunger. Pushing up the map alone as a crewmate can be super beneficial for the team, as you're able to access coal sleds positioned further up the map sooner. Doing so can return 3, 4, or even 5 barrels of coal to the ship by the second day. But pushing alone isn't without its risks, the major one being the constant threat of cannibals. I'm going to break this video down into 3 parts. Part 1 will look into what cannibals do, cannibal health and damage stats, and details into their spawn rate. Part 2 will look into what your options are when fighting them. And part 3 will be my own personal recommendations when fighting cannibals to minimize damage and maximize survivability when pushing ahead. Dreadhunger isn't the easiest game to understand, so I'd highly recommend checking out my 2 beginner's guides currently up on this channel for both crewmate and Thrall to understand the very basics of the game before returning to this video. Ideally, by the end of this guide, you'll feel prepared for any cannibals thrown your way and won't have trouble dispensing of cannibals moving forward. Part 1. What are cannibals? Summoning cannibals to attack a player is one of the options a thrall has through the use of their bone dagger. When summoned, little aggressive pink human-like creatures will sprint at their target on all 4s and attack the target until the cannibal dies or manage to kill their target. These creatures run faster than regular players and have 2 attack options. They will either bite and slash you in melee range, or they'll stop running and throw a rock or 2 at you instead. These attacks do approximately 5 damage each, and assuming a player has 100 health, it will take a fair few attacks for a cannibal to kill you. A cannibal has 35 health, which means the following. Shooting a cannibal with a pistol or musket will kill the cannibal in 1 shot, assuming you're close enough for the pistol to do full damage. The bow and upgraded saber will kill a cannibal in 2 hits each. The axe, regular saber, shovel, and pickaxe will kill a cannibal in 3 attacks. The cleaver will kill a cannibal in 4 attacks, and throwing or hitting a cannibal with rocks will kill it in 5 hits. A bear trap will deal 30 damage to a cannibal and hold it in its place. This cannibal can still throw rocks at you or attack you if you're close enough to it. Knowing how many attacks you require to kill a cannibal will help you maximize your attacks and ensure you don't waste any attacks on cannibals who have already died. Dreadhunger has a sort of spawn cap, which prevents more than 6 cannibals being active on the map at any given time. If more than 6 are summoned, such as a tier 3 cannibal call which summons 8 cannibals, the extra cannibals will wait to spawn in until a cannibal dies to take its place. This is particularly relevant for fighting against a double cannibal call, which refers to when both thralls summon cannibals on one player at the same time. If this happens, you'll be faced with up to 16 cannibals. If each cannibal is dealing 10 damage, you can see why this would quickly go downhill for you. Cannibals have a number of spawn points around the map and will be assigned to a spawn point based on the location of the player they're summoned on. There's a minimum range that the spawn point must be from a player for a cannibal to spawn there, but it's definitely possible for you to get unlucky and be right on the cusp of the minimum range when the cannibals are summoned, which results in cannibals spawning almost right on top of you and giving you very little time to react or set up to fight them. But dealing with these cannibals is what this guide is all about. So now that we're all on the same page about what cannibals actually do, let's move on to part 2. And talk about the ways to fight them. You have a few options, depending on how much time you're willing to spend preparing for a future cannibal attack. The method that takes the least amount of time to prepare for is simply using a melee weapon only to fight. Your character may have spawned in with a good weapon like the axe or saber. Otherwise, you should build an axe or pickaxe immediately and push forward with that weapon as your primary defense against cannibals. This method will save you time, and you're able to travel much further as you're spending less time at a crafting bench on the first day. If you're left uninterrupted and no cannibals are summoned, then you're making great time and carry the crew with your coal gathering efficiency. When fighting with a melee weapon, your attacks can damage multiple cannibals at once, so be sure to swing your camera around to ensure you're hitting as many cannibals as possible with each swing. You can also throw all melee weapons other than the shovel by holding right click, then pressing left click, and this will do increased damage depending on how far the weapon travels when thrown. But the downside to this method is the amount of damage you'll take from the cannibals by only using a melee weapon. Each cannibal will be able to get at least 2 attacks in before they die, and depending on how many cannibals there are, there will be varying impacts on your overall health. If 8 cannibals are summoned on you before you return to the ship on day 1, they'll straight up deal about 80 damage. This isn't including the very real possibility a number of these cannibals will stop short of your melee attack range and throw rocks at you while you're fighting the cannibals immediately in front of you, adding significant damage. Long story short, if I were a Thrall, I'd be counting you as a dead crewmate. The second method is building a handful of bear traps. These can be used to nullify the cannibals that step in the trap for 8 seconds. Once trapped, you can use your melee weapon to kill the cannibal in one hit without taking any damage from the cannibal when performed correctly. Any cannibals who aren't trapped will still do damage, but it will be reduced as less cannibals are swarming you and slicing madly at the same time. This method is very much a middle ground between saving time and being ready for anything. You can craft 2 or 3 bear traps pretty quickly, but every trap you make effectively equals extra health for you later in the game. I would recommend at least 5 bear traps, as that's the maximum that you can carry in one item slot. More are of course welcome, but may be unnecessary. The final method is crafting a bow with plenty of arrows. Hitting a cannibal with 2 arrows will kill it, so it's easy to dispose of cannibals before they even get close enough to damage you. This requires good aim and the AI of the cannibals not acting up, causing them to break from their straight line towards you to subtly zigzag for unexplained reason, causing you to miss shots and losing valuable arrows. This method takes the longest to prepare for. You'll need 2 bones, 1 sinew, and at least 10 arrows for the bow and arrow to matter. I like crafting 20 arrows as they're also usable against the polar bears later in the game, and arrows are retrievable off the corpses of the cannibals you kill. You will lose time, but you'll be as safe as you possibly can be with a bow. You can even craft a melee weapon and bear traps too if you want to be ultra super duper safe. Each method has their pros and cons, which you should consider each match as you plan to push ahead alone. Of course, the easiest method of dealing with cannibals is fighting them as a group. Many melee weapons make short work of cannibals, and a few bows will absolutely decimate them. Bear traps are less efficient as a group though, as cannibals won't necessarily be running directly towards you, and will instead be targeting someone else and make it more difficult to land the bear trap as it runs past you. Finally, part 3. It's my recommendation to craft 5 bear traps pretty much every game. You'll be ready for cannibals, can use them to kill wolves without taking any damage at all, and it'll be helpful against the bears at the end of the summit or the large pack of wolves on the approach. When it comes to the bow, the time you'll spend finding the resources and crafting the bow is definitely noticeable. You'll spend time searching skeletons early on for bones and sinew, and steal a lot of iron scrap to make your arrows. You could find yourself way behind the 8 ball by the time you're finally ready to push forward, not to mention the extra item slots you'll lose needing to hold all the extra arrows. This will of course make you less efficient with the coal you're trying to push ahead early to grab. I would only recommend taking the time to craft the bow if you plan on pushing to the nitro early on too, or plan on PvPing the thralls early on. Neither are a necessary strategy to win, but can be a fun variant to play to spice up excessive crew games that you might get in a row. I would also recommend taking the time to search a doctor's bag or 2 on the first day and craft at least 1 syringe. This will keep your health high should you take damage from a cannibal wave, so you'll be at full health for any future cannibals sent your way. Syringes won't heal you until you're out of combat, so using a syringe mid-fight will do nothing but waste your time. Storing the syringes somewhere safe, possibly in the back of a shelter that you're staying the night at, is the best way to have syringes ready without losing the valuable item slot that you need for coal gathering purposes. Crafting syringes where possible will act as a massive sustain boost and keep you strong should the thrall themselves show up to attack you, assuming you must have been low health after you just wiped out their cannibal wave. My melee weapon of choice is the axe. It's easy enough to craft and does solid damage to cannibals. If you're fortunate enough to find a captain's sword and upgrade it, then the upgraded saber is definitely the best option. But it's unrealistic to hedge your bets on finding one, as it's very rare that it'll happen. The saber's durability also makes it unreliable against a large number of cannibals, as once its durability runs out, which is after 12 hits by the way, the sword will only deal 8 damage each swing, down from 15 damage, making you far weaker against any predator. The shovel's swing animation is awkward and more difficult to hit multiple cannibals with, so I'd recommend avoiding this melee weapon for fights against cannibals. I'd recommend only using the pistol to shoot one cannibal, then swapping to a different weapon available. The pistol will instantly kill the cannibal you shoot, but the long reload time makes it relatively useless after the first shot. The cannibals will close significant distance during your reload animations and be on top of you in most cases, ripping you to shreds as you're still fiddling with your gun. When cannibals are summoned, I'd highly recommend finding a location that gives you an advantage. The number one spot I like to go to are bottleneck locations. Ideally spots that cannibals can only funnel into one at a time through a narrow entrance. This is only a good strategy if you're armed with bear traps. Locations like shelters or cave corners will protect your back from cannibals, as you know no cannibals are spawning behind you. You can confidently put down a number of bear traps in the entry point of that shelter and mass stun a bunch of cannibals as they're trying to enter. Be careful when doing this to leave a space for you to advance up to melee swing to finish off cannibals after they step on their first trap, without stepping into a bear trap yourself. Cannibals will also block each other when trapped, preventing cannibals behind them from entering until the cannibal ahead of them is released from the bear trap or that cannibal is killed. On occasion, the cannibals will glitch out and manage to fly or jump over the trapped cannibals and can cause them to get past your line of traps entirely. Don't panic if this happens. Simply melee these ones down quickly and let the remaining bear traps protect you from the rest of the cannibals swarming outside. Without traps, bottleneck locations can lead to a bunch of cannibals all arriving on your location at the same time, and you'll be faced with an overwhelming amount of damage. And that pretty much wraps up all my advice for dealing with cannibals. The main takeaway from this video is plan ahead and prepare. Knowing your risks will make you a better player. You'll more than likely die to cannibals a lot, even knowing all of this. You take risks, sometimes it pays off, other times you didn't build traps and you're swarmed and die. And that sucks. I know I've died a lot of time doing just that in Dreadhunger. Use these fights to learn the cannibal spawn points and your best locations to fight them in. There's no magic solution to fighting cannibals beyond spending the time so that you're ready to do so. That being said, I can give you one last tip when escaping cannibals. Jumping on top of tall icebergs can slow down the cannibals' progress, as they seem to stutter around the base of the iceberg and struggle to climb up after you. You can use this to gain distance and head towards the ship if it's close enough. It may be the extra distance that you need to get to the ship without dying. Practicing jumping on each iceberg, particularly the ones near where the ship stops often, could save your life in a pinch as you outrun the cannibals to reach the ship and get up just in time. Cannibals cannot attack you once you're on board the main expedition ship. Hopefully this video was helpful and you feel more confident in your next crew game to push up alone without dying like a chump to cannibals. Please like the video if you found this guide useful and subscribe for more Dreadhunger videos. Good luck out in the Arctic and watch out for Bongo.